One of my earliest memories playing video games was sitting in my apartment at age 3, showing off the hub world of Donkey Kong 64 to one of my babysitters. Even outside the realm of gaming, that memory exists as one of the oldest moments I've retained over the years. I remember fighting the infinitely spawning enemies and trying to swim beyond the world border to no avail. At that age, I don't even think I got past the first level, or now that I think about it, I might not have even gotten into the first level. The bright colors and music of the DK Isles were enough to keep me entertained for hours. Donkey Kong 64, by nature of being the first game I remember playing, was what I compared every subsequent game I played to. My concept of what a video game was, or could be, was defined by how I could relate it to what I already knew. Over the course of my life, I've made sure to replay DK64 annually, and in many cases I go on to get 101% completion on the save file. My love for this game has even caused me to branch out into other titles in the series, namely the Donkey Kong Country trilogy for the SNES. I even garnered a reputation in high school for the frequency I would play Donkey Kong games during classes. So in the last 5 years or so, you can imagine my shock when I first heard that Donkey Kong 64 wasn't universally loved. In fact, the game has achieved an almost infamous reputation for a plethora of reasons. Through my research, the negative reviews on YouTube seem to vastly outweigh the positive ones. At first I was skeptical and dismissed these videos, but keeping these criticisms in mind with my yearly playthroughs has caused me to reassess the game. So I've decided to take it upon myself to make a definitive Donkey Kong 64 analysis, highlighting the positives and negatives of one of my most beloved games. As I've already stated, I have a strong bias in favor of this game, but I will do my best to incorporate as little of it as possible. Before I get into the meat and bananas of this review, I have a couple things to address. Firstly, this review will spoil both the plot and puzzles this game has to offer. This should come as no surprise, but I just wanted to make sure it was explicitly said. Considering that Donkey Kong games have never had rich lore, and most of the challenges are pretty self-evident, that shouldn't be too much of an issue for anyone. I'd say 20 years is a good enough grace period for spoilers. Secondly, this review will be broken up into smaller segments for ease of editing. The time between each upload will likely depend on the amount of positive feedback and the general busyness of my life. And lastly, to make this review as accessible as possible to those unfamiliar with Donkey Kong, I believe a history lesson is in order. In 1981, the original Donkey Kong arcade cabinet was released by Nintendo after failed negotiations to make a licensed Popeye game. The original plan was to have Popeye as the player character, Bluto as the enemy throwing objects, and Olive Oil as the damsel in distress. Of course, when the original plan fell through, rather than scrapping the project entirely, Nintendo created all new original characters. Jumpman, which we now know as Mario, Donkey Kong the Pesky Ape, and Pauline the Sexy Babe. Following the success of Donkey Kong, 2 sequels were released, and after that point, not counting obscure spin-offs or console ports, there were no new Donkey Kong games of substance for over a decade. The drought ended in 1994 when a new title was released, Donkey Kong Country. This time, the game wasn't being made by Nintendo, but rather it was licensed to a second-party British developer called Rareware. DKC was critically acclaimed for its cutting-edge graphics, tight controls, and stellar soundtrack. In the process of transforming an arcade character design to more advanced home consoles, Donkey Kong underwent some physical changes, including a signature tie, a tuft of hair at the top of his skull, which, according to the TV show, is in fact a skeletal deformity, and his nipples were removed. Within the lore of Donkey Kong Country, the character Cranky Kong is an elderly arcade Donkey Kong, and modern Donkey Kong is actually his grandchild. Following Donkey Kong Country were Donkey Kong Countries 2 and 3, which, as a collective, is referred to as the DKC trilogy. By the time DKC3 came out, however, the gaming industry was in a transitional era. While 3D graphics were considered a luxury in the early 90s, by the mid to late 90s, they were slowly becoming the norm. The demand for 3D graphics meant that many developers had to innovate and rework pre-existing 2D franchises to flow cohesively in a 3-dimensional environment. Some series like Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy, and Mario prospered with this new dimension. Others, like Castlevania, Earthworm Jim, and Bubsy, didn't do too hot. 1999 was when the Donkey Kong series made its transition into 3D with today's topic, Donkey Kong 64. DK64's inspiration and design logically drinks from the well of the prior installments in the series, but there is a second source that led to its creation, Super Mario 64, a game which completely changed the landscape of gaming as we knew it. It's credited with the creation of the 3D platformer genre, shaping open-world game design, and popularizing hub worlds, just to name a few. The co-founder of Rockstar Games, the studio behind GTA and Red Dead, once stated, "Anyone who makes 3D games, who says they've not borrowed something from Mario or Zelda, is lying," from the games on Nintendo 64, not necessarily the ones from today. Valve founder Gabe Newell claimed it was his favorite game of all time and that it convinced him that video games could be an art form. And most importantly for our purposes, Chris Sutherland, a programmer at Rareware in the 90s, can be quoted saying, "With Super Mario 64 being the first of its kind, that became the de facto place to look for inspiration to solutions when we started building 3D platformers on N64. Rareware's first 3D platformer, Banjo-Kazooie, was released in 1998, a year prior to DK64. The development of these two games overlapped, and assets from one project were sometimes repurposed in the other. During this review, I will reference the original Donkey Kong arcade cabinet, the DKC trilogy, Banjo-Kazooie, and Super Mario 64 ad nauseum. Without those games, DK64 could not exist in its current state."
Okay!
Within a second of booting up the game, there's already something to comment on. An inclusion so subtle that most people won't understand its significance. Donkey Kong saying the word okay actually has a nuanced purpose. As mentioned earlier, Donkey Kong 64 was designed specifically for the N64. While many of its competitors at the time opted for disc-based systems, Nintendo designed the N64 to take cartridges. One of the downsides of this decision was the fact that cartridge pins are prone to getting dusty and are finicky in general. This means that it's not uncommon to have to repeatedly readjust the cartridge and flick the power switch on and off to get things working. Sometimes this process can be as long as a couple minutes, especially if you don't take particularly good care of your hardware. Assuming your N64 is below your TV, Donkey Kong 64's immediate audio cue saves you the next strain of looking up between every power cycle. Other games like Super Mario 64 and Pokemon Stadium use a similar tactic. If you utilize the audio cue to your fullest and drink enough milk, your neck bone might be able to survive an otherwise fatal car crash or late night alley struggle snuggle. And oh boy, it's that time already, the DK rap. If you know anything about this game, you're definitely familiar with the DK rap. This bizarre and catchy song has been rightfully memed into oblivion for its silly lyrics and animation. Commenting on such a culturally significant masterpiece is difficult as I hardly know what to add. I'm not going to play the song in full here, so if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you do so. A link will be in the description. I also want to use this time to showcase some of my favorite edits. As stupid as it may seem on the surface, I absolutely adore the DK rap. It manages to set the tone of the game while also introducing the cast of playable characters. The tone I'm referring to is the balance of badassery and goofiness. We go from Donkey Kong mowing down insects with a firearm, to Lanky Kong inflation porn, to Chunky Kong slapstick humor, and the whole thing ends when an enemy military general lobs a grenade into the crowd. The commingling of these concepts is consistent throughout the game, so the setup in the intro makes sense. Have you ever been to a friend's house, and his mom is really well-mannered and polite, and then one day your friend really pisses her off and she drops a cuss word which is completely out of character for her? The swear word might not even be particularly heinous, but the usage of it by her is so much more powerful, knowing that under normal circumstances she wouldn't say it. The DK rap sort of does that. Towards the end of the song, Chunky Kong is referred to as a hell of a guy. Hell is debatably not even a swear word, but it is taboo enough to elicit some sort of response in your brain. You're certainly not going to be hearing it in Paw Patrol anytime soon. DK64 hits the sort of sweet spot that SpongeBob, Shrek, and Adventure Time did, in the sense that they are in theory for children, but they still have mature ideas and aren't overly sanitized. Interestingly, despite all of this, DK64 manages to maintain an E rating. But even more surprising than that is how the DK rap was handled in Super Smash Bros. Melee. The Super Smash Bros. Series is known for incorporating music, items, and characters from Nintendo's various IPs, and considering Donkey Kong was one of the combatants, it seemed logical to include the DK rap. The thing is, the word hell was replaced in that version with the word heck, despite the fact that Melee is rated T for teens, whilst DK64 is rated E for everyone.
He can jump high, but this calls one heck of a guy.
This likely isn't the result of a social climate shift either, as there was only a 2-year gap between the title's releases. Try wrapping your head around that. On further inspection of the lyrics, the mentioning of walnuts is sort of a non sequitur in the list of foods. Peanuts, pineapples, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconuts all make an appearance in the game either as ammo or as health. Walnuts aren't mentioned or shown after this point, leading me to believe that they were removed later in development. My theory is that walnuts were originally Tiny Kong's ammo of choice. Tiny Kong's ammo type is feathers, which makes it the only ammo type not referenced in the rap. So if walnuts are the only food item that are mentioned and do not appear, and feathers are the only ammo type that are not mentioned and do appear, it leads me to the conclusion that she originally fired walnuts. I mentioned that in addition to setting the tone, the DK rap also introduces the playable characters. For reoccurring characters, there's the titular Donkey Kong and his buddy Diddy. Of the 5 playable Kongs, Donkey Kong is by far my least favorite. Unlike the rest of the cast, Donkey Kong doesn't really fill a niche. He's sort of a jack of all trades. He's strong, but not as strong as Chunky. He's cool, but not as cool as Diddy. He's fast, but not as fast as Lanky. The closest semblance he has of a character trait is laziness. In DK's house, there's banana peels scattered on the floor. And in the credit sequence at the end of the game, he falls asleep while waiting for Cranky to arrive. Cranky even explicitly calls him lazy the first time you talk to him. Diddy's inclusion in this game was virtually guaranteed. In fact, Diddy was playable in more games in the DKC trilogy than Donkey Kong himself. Furthermore, in Donkey Kong Land 3, a Game Boy adaptation of Donkey Kong Country 3, Donkey Kong doesn't make an appearance in any form. Diddy is also absent in this game, but the extra life balloons are modeled after his likeness. Diddy even went on to have his own series, Diddy Kong Racing, which received positive reviews. In DK64, Diddy fills the role of the cool guy, which was established in DKC2 with his beatboxing animation. He also has the dopest mode of transportation that exists, a jetpack. The 3 new additions to the Kong clan are Tiny Kong, Chunky Kong, and Lanky Kong. If you played Donkey Kong Country 3, Tiny and Chunky will look familiar to you. In a bizarre choice from Rareware, the characters Dixie and Kitty are mysteriously absent and replaced with counterparts. Kitty is known for his Herculean strength and wimpy nature, the exact same character layout for Chunky. Dixie is known for her femininity, including luscious blonde hair which she can use to slow her descent through the air. Sure enough, Tiny Kong is also a girly, blonde hair twirling character. The 3rd new character, Lanky Kong, is probably the fan favorite of the newcomers. Personality-wise, he fills the role of the group clown. If left idle for long enough, he'll even put on a short juggling show. When the dust settles from the grenade at the end of the rap, the player is greeted with the title screen. In theory, the title screen of a game is ultimately unimportant, as the player won't be spending a substantial amount of time viewing it. The title screen won't make or break a game, and as long as it's functional, it serves its purpose. Some developers will put in the bare minimum amount of effort and call it a day, while others will create a nice presentation. The title screen for A Bug's Life on N64 is simply a still image with flashing words that say press start. Mario Kart 64 upped the ante by including a flag animation. On the other end of the spectrum, there are some really cool interactive title screens. Super Mario 64 allows you to twist and contort Mario's face. Star Fox 64 allows you to move part of the logo with the analog stick, and the fully animated Star Fox crew will follow it with their heads. DK64's title screen falls between still image and player interaction. It showcases moments from the game with a rounded black border to give you the illusion that you're watching a camera feed. DK64's title screen is good. Better than fine, but not quite great either. From a gaming historian perspective, this title screen holds significance. In the early 1980s, when arcades dominated the gaming market, arcade title screens were designed specifically to prosper in that environment. By showcasing moments of gameplay, arcade games could entice arcade patrons to play them. If left idly for long enough, games like Pac-Man would show snippets of levels to grab people's attention. Eventually, home consoles became popular in the mid-80s, and developers who once only developed games for arcade settings were now making games for the living room. Because of this, many early home console games contain arcade DNA. The best game to showcase this is the original Super Mario Bros. Firstly, like an arcade game, the title screen will eventually lead into demo gameplay if left alone for long enough. This is redundant, however, because there is no reason to entice the player to play your game if they've already purchased it. The second bit of DNA left over from arcade design is the inclusion of a score. In all my years of playing Mario games, I have never met or heard of someone who plays to get a high score. Scores were commonplace in the arcade era because many of those games were not designed with a definitive end. DK64's title screen was either knowingly or unknowingly designed in an arcade format. Rare's last arcade game was Killer Instinct 2 in 1995, which, sure enough, showcased gameplay in the title screen. DK64's development started in 1997, so it's possible that the recent memory of Killer Instinct 2 influenced this decision. In fact, Killer Instinct and the Donkey Kong series have a history of connections. Funky's Fugue from DKC1 was actually repurposed and was originally intended for Killer Instinct. The character Chief Thunder even appears on a poster in DKC2, further cementing the relationship between the two properties. Upon pressing start, we enter the main menu, which I must say is splendid. Standard main menus usually consist of either a row or column of options without much care or thought put into them. DK64's main menu is organized in a pentagon, and options are highlighted in a circular motion, with your current option being displayed on Donkey Kong's held barrel. When you confirm your selection, Donkey Kong will throw the barrel at the screen, which I think is nifty. The best part of the main menu is how lively it is. If you sit for long enough, creatures will crawl out of the woodworks and participate in buffoonery. Crumbling grunts will taunt DK, beavers will roll around on barrels, and eventually the time of day will change to night. It's a small touch that most players won't pay notice to, but I appreciate that they went above and beyond. For right now, I'm going to focus on adventure, and I will touch upon the other content at a later time. My biggest gripe with the main menu is the separation of sound settings and options. If they really wanted a fifth option, they could have just included a credits section. And finally, it's time to actually play the game. The game opens with a cinematic cutscene. I won't show it in full length for the sake of time, but if you're really interested in seeing it, I'll have a link in the description. To summarize, King K. Rool is back to seek revenge against the Kongs. His new plan is seemingly foolproof. Plunder the DK Isles for its resources, capture whatever inhabitants you can, and launch a Death Star-like laser to decimate what's left. Unfortunately, due to the incompetence of his army, their mothership crashes on a rock and becomes stranded. To make matters even worse, the Doomsday laser isn't finalized and will require additional time to be finished. Squawks the Parrot then informs DK of the disappearance of his friends, and the game begins. The platformer genre naturally prioritizes gameplay over story, so you should never expect an RPG-grade narrative in your glorified jumping simulator. Mario, the king of 2D and 3D platformers, has been recycling the same stolen princess plot for almost 40 years and still puts out great games. The only component a platformer story truly needs is a call to action for the player. DK64's plot is composed of 3 conflicts, all of which are actually borrowed from earlier games. The missing banana horde, the Kong clan's food supply, is stripped out of DKC1. The kidnappings are reminiscent of DKC2, and the giant mechanical doomsday device was already done in DKC3. From a practical standpoint, these 3 conflicts make sense. The stolen banana horde contextualizes why you'd want to collect bananas in the first place. Super Mario 64 did the same thing with Bowser stealing the Power Stars. The kidnapped Kong's conflict was designed so that you would gradually build up your posse as you progress. Each Kong feels more special when you collect them one at a time. The Doomsday device was put in place to drive the stakes. It makes everything more urgent that way. Overall, the plot is adequate. The presentation of the cutscene is all nice and well, but I do have a major bone to pick with the cutscene itself. The intro cutscene exemplifies one of the most infuriating game design decisions to exist. A gaming sin which should be purged at all costs. The unskippable cutscene. Now, technically, DK64's cutscenes are all skippable, but you have to jump through hoops to do it. Let me explain. By playing the game with default settings, you are in no way able to end a cutscene prematurely. You can press A and start till the cows come home, but you'll be watching that cutscene whether you like it or not. If you exit the game and go back to the main menu, you can go into options and turn on cinematic skip. Now you're probably thinking, well, that wasn't too bad, but it doesn't do what you think. The cutscene skip option will automatically bypass every cutscene in the game without manual input, meaning you either watch every cutscene or you watch none. Banjo-Kazooie's intro cinematic could be skipped manually. Hell, even the DK rap can be skipped manually. There's really no excuse for this. Some games can get away with unskippable cutscenes if they're infrequent and short, but DK64 has over 15 minutes worth. On a side note, my passionate rage for mistreated cutscenes comes from LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga. Guess how many minutes worth of unskippable cutscenes there are in that game? 53. At one point, I had a plan to speedrun it, but the agony of watching the same cutscenes over and over again drove me nuts. Now I want to make it clear that I have nothing against cutscenes. I will always sit through them the first time playing a game, but on my second, third, or 100th playthrough, I'll often skip through them. From an animator standpoint, I can understand the urge to revoke this ability from the player. You don't want to pour hundreds of hours into animating something people will just skip over. One potential middle ground would be to have the game check if there's a save file that has viewed that cutscene, and then only allow skipping if it's been seen at least once. That way, you can ensure the player has seen it, while also allowing them the option to avoid it on subsequent playthroughs. Another way of looking at it is that if your player is skipping cutscenes, it means one of 3 things. Either A, your story thus far is so unengaging that the player would rather just play the game. B, your player is super casual and has no investment in anything other than social media and Netflix, and their ADHD prevents them from sitting still for more than 30 seconds. Or C, the player has already seen the cutscene. Option A means that the development team has made a blunder, in which case the option to skip a cutscene can be seen as compensation. If it's option B, that's just a result of the degradation of the gaming community and society as a whole, something completely out of your control. Even if you force this crowd to watch your content, they'd probably just pull out their phones. And option C just means that the player doesn't want to waste their time with information they already have. In all 3 of these scenarios, allowing the option to skip cutscenes is either positive or neutral. Now, where were we? Oh, right. Donkey Kong's house. The game picks up right where the intro cinematic ended. If you decide to take a look around before leaving immediately, there are a couple of cool Easter eggs. Firstly, the gramophone and boombox are in reference to the first Donkey Kong Country's title screen animation, the purpose of which was to show the passing of the torch between the older Donkey Kong generation to the newer one. The red metal girder and barrel are an obvious reference to the Donkey Kong arcade cabinet, and the most obscure of them all, the framed photo of a dolphin. Internally, the Nintendo GameCube was called Project Dolphin before it was given a commercial name. Evidence of this can even be found on the GameCube itself, as if you flip it upside down, all of the model numbers start with DOL. Nintendo and its second-party companies like to sprinkle in references to Project Dolphin in the late 90s and early 2000s. Captain Olimar's ship is called the Dolphin. Isle Delfino from Super Mario Sunshine is shaped like a dolphin. Donkey Kong's framed dolphin shows up again at the 101% completion cutscene with the word audition stamped over it. It's likely that this cutscene was supposed to be a mock audition for a Donkey Kong title on the GameCube. Upon walking outside, Squawks directs us to go to Cranky Kong and tells us about the missing banana horde. Cranky Kong in this game is a scientist and is responsible for handing out new moves which will help the Kongs on their journey. Stepping out of Cranky's lab sends Donkey Kong into contemplation over the information he was just told. What's interesting about this is that Donkey Kong refers to himself in the third person within his own inner monologue. Diddy Kong, on the other hand, refers to himself as I in his head. This means either the writers forgot to write the character's thoughts consistently, or Donkey Kong is of low intelligence. Personally, I'd like to believe the latter. If you have your pitchfork or torch handy, I'm about to cover another flaw in this game. We've already covered the unskippable cutscene fiasco, but get ready for the unskippable tutorial. DK64 requires you to complete 4 tutorial tasks before you continue the game. Even if you were to hypothetically clip out of bounds and avoid them, certain portions of levels won't load in, meaning they wanted you to play the tutorial so badly they developed a failsafe. How did DK64's ancestors deal with tutorials? To my knowledge, no Donkey Kong game before this had a tutorial of any kind. Super Mario 64 didn't have one either, and Banjo-Kazooie had an optional one. In my opinion, there is no benefit to a mandatory tutorial. Some games, like Pokemon Sun and Moon, have unskippable tutorials so long and bothersome that it detracts from the game experience as a whole. I do have to acknowledge that while I'm making a big fuss over DK64's forced tutorial, it is very benign overall. The entire shindig can be wrapped up in around 2 minutes, and you can go on your way. I'm more upset about it out of principle than I am because it inconveniences me. Outside of the fact that it is compulsory, the mechanics that were chosen to be tutorialized should also be scrutinized. The 4 tutorial tasks are swimming, vine swinging, lifting objects, and grenade lobbing. Out of these 4, the only one that I think deserves to be in the tutorial is swimming. A general tutorial should be used to introduce mechanics that are both common and unintuitive. Considering water appears in most levels, and swimming in older games is notoriously annoying, this makes sense to include. Vine swinging, on the other hand, is really no different from jumping. All it requires is timing. There's no need to tutorialize it. Lifting items is almost exclusively Chunky Kong's duty, with a couple of exceptions. To include it in a tutorial when he's not even an available playable character is illogical. Grenade throwing would make more sense if it was taught at a different point in the game. I would have explained the grenade mechanic shortly after the gun mechanics. Since Funky Kong is the local weapons expert, he should be the one to teach the player about grenade safety instead of Cranky the bitter old scientist. When the tutorial is complete and you return back to Cranky, you receive one of the potions he's been brewing. Simian Slam is the DK crew's ground pound, and it will be used a lot throughout the course of the game. Also, the faux Latin scientific names are a really nice touch. This newly acquired ability now allows us to escape to the exterior of the Donkey Kong Isles. Squawks appears again to tell us to check the mysterious island that isn't blocked off to find clues. When you gain control again, you'll immediately see 5 numbered pads in a floating barrel, and when you touch one of the pads, you'll be rudely interrupted by Squawks again. With any game, you'll inevitably have to explain things to the player, but the way Donkey Kong 64 handles this task is very poor. By bringing the gameplay to a screeching halt and shoving Squawks onto the screen, you're ruining the flow of the game. Super Mario 64 dealt with explanations mostly through signposts, which you could read at your leisure, but in order to do so, you would have to come to a standstill. Banjo-Kazooie's explanations came in the form of dialogue, which didn't require you to stop moving, meaning explanations didn't hinder gameplay. Donkey Kong 64's method is a step back from its ancestors. The green igloo-looking island houses an ex-member of K. Rool's army. K. Lumsy is a crocodilian giant with a heart of gold who refused to harm the Kongs and was placed in prison for disobeying orders. K. Lumsy begs DK to help break him out of his cell in exchange for friendship, and Donkey Kong agrees to. In a state of joy, K. Lumsy then does a jig that is so intense that a boulder a mile away shatters to rubble, revealing a golden banana. Making use of our connected number pad, we can swiftly make it over to the mainland and collect our first golden banana. The newly formed cave entrance is begging to be explored, so let's see what's in this bad boy. This room is the lobby to Jungle Japes, the first level of DK64. Here we meet a strange-looking toll guard called B Locker. If B Locker's design sticks out as odd to you, you aren't alone. Up until this point, every character in this game was an animal. B Locker appears to be a wooden signpost with eyes and arms attached. One of my issues with the Donkey Kong series as a whole is the inclusion of inanimate object characters. In DKC1, there was the boss Dum Drum the Oil Barrel. In DKC2, there was Cleaver the Ghost Sword. And by DKC3, you had Belcher the Barrel, Bleak the Snowman, and the Banana Birds. With these few exceptions, the entirety of the trilogy was composed of animal characters, and I felt that helped the game stand out. Donkey Kong has always felt more mature than a lot of its counterparts, so objects with googly eyes never sat well with me. In an interview, a member of the development team behind Donkey Kong 64 stated they wanted to do everything in their power to differentiate the project from Banjo-Kazooie. This makes the inclusion of so many objects with faces an even worse decision. In Banjo-Kazooie, you had talking toilets, buckets, eggs, honeycombs, you name it. The whole take an inanimate object and toss on some eyes concept is synonymous with the Bear and Bird duo. B Locker looks more at home in Banjo-Kazooie or Conker's Bad Fur Day, not in the lobbies of Donkey Kong levels. In every level's lobby, you'll also find DK's grandma Wrinkly Kong, or at least what's left of her. Wrinkly explains that she died after the events of DKC3 and now roams the world as a ghost. The way Wrinkly Kong talks about her death makes it seem like she's been dead a while, so it's sort of strange that Donkey Kong is just now finding out that she died. Wrinkly reprises her role from DKC2 as a tip giver. Scattered around each level's lobby are 5 doors which correspond to the 5 playable Kongs. Wrinkly will emerge from each door, giving you 1 tip on how to get a specific golden banana in the upcoming level. These tips range from helpful and insightful to vague and obvious. I like the concept of an advice-giving character in a game, but I feel like it was implemented poorly here. In DKC2, Wrinkly would usually charge for advice. I like this model because it encourages players to scour the level and experiment with puzzles so that they don't have to waste their hard-earned coins. And in the circumstance that they are completely stumped, the failsafe exists so that they won't rage quit. It's a good system. In DK64, the advice is free, meaning you should knock on every door like it's Halloween and get tips before even entering the level. This makes some puzzles completely obsolete. There is no drawback to getting free advice. Furthermore, the DKC2 Wrinkly had a plethora of tips to pick from, whereas in DK64, each door yields 1 singular tip. This means that if you're stumped on a golden banana that isn't covered by one of the 5 doors, you're screwed. Wrinkly Kong in DK64 is undeniably inferior to the one in DKC2. Well, now that we're a good 30-something minutes into this review, how about we actually play the first level? Oh, that's right, we got another cutscene to talk about. There's a very perplexing piece of technology that shows up in most of the K. Rool scenes. This animation plays when you enter the first level portal, meaning that DK is currently in Jungle Japes. But the cutscene itself seems to show DK stuck in a room in front of K. Rool's throne. K. Rool then exclaims how Donkey Kong hasn't even received his first golden banana, which isn't true by this point in the game. So what is going on here? My best understanding is that the windowed room acts similar to the magic mirror in Shrek. It shows an approximation of real-world events upon request. Donkey Kong didn't actually collect his first golden banana by slamming the ground, but K. Rool is only interested in whether or not he had received one. This magic mirror technology isn't explained well at all, and as a child I didn't know what to make of it. When the cutscene's finished, we talk to Squawks again!
Get out of my life!
And now we can actually play the game. But first, we need to talk about collectibles. DK64 has a reputation for having a lot of collectibles. Famously, it achieved the Guinness World Record for the most collectibles in a video game in the year 2000, with 3,821 items. Seeing as this is a comprehensive review, I'll take it upon myself to explain how the collectible ecosystem functions in this game. I recommend all viewers to get a nice cup of joe, perhaps a bagel, preferably one of Asiago cheese variety, and strap in, because this will take a little while. Regular bananas are the most abundant item, with 500 appearing on every level. Bananas come in 3 types: singular, bunches, and balloons. Singular bananas are worth 1, bunches are worth 5, and balloons are worth 10. If you collect 75 bananas on a level, you'll receive a banana medal. This can be done 5 times in a single level, once with each Kong. I'll leave a tab here to come back. Bananas are used to unlock boss fights. Upon beating a boss, you'll receive a boss key. Boss keys are used to unlock new level lobbies. In order to get into a level whose lobby you just unlocked, you'll need golden bananas. Golden bananas are completely different from regular bananas, and you'll find 25 of them on each level. There's also 26 in the hub world. So 25 times 7 levels plus 26 brings us to a total of 201 golden bananas. Sometimes, golden bananas are stored in bonus barrels, and will require you to complete a mini-game to retrieve them. 40 of the 201 golden bananas are collected by exchanging blueprints with a rat. The conversion rate is 1-to-1. Blueprints are held by K. Rool's elite cronies, called Casplats. There are 5 Casplats in every level, including the overworld. Banana coins can be used to purchase goods at the 3 shops in the game. There are also rainbow coins, which are worth 25 coins, and we'll give 5 of them to each of the Kongs. One of the 3 shops is Funky's Armory, where you can buy arms and upgrades. In order to use the weapons you receive, you'll need sufficient ammo. Ammo comes in 2 types, homing and regular. On the topic of weapons, there's also orange grenades. Candy's shop sells instruments and health upgrades. Each Kong gets their own unique instrument. If an instrument is used outside of an instrument pad, it will cost a usage fee. If you've depleted your instrument, you can refuel it by touching a pair of headphones. The headphones themselves are not a collectible. If you lose health, you can replenish your supply with a watermelon slice. Cranky Kong's shop sells potions which give the Kongs new moves. Some of these new moves run on coconut crystal energy, so you'll constantly have to replenish your supply of them. Battle crowns are collected when you beat a battle arena pad challenge, and are used to open one specific door towards the end of the game. There's 10 of them in total. When you meet the Great Banana Fairy for the first time, you'll receive a special camera. The camera is used to take photos of banana fairies. When their picture is taken, they'll be added to your inventory. There's 20 in total. When you collect all of them, you can trade them in for a golden banana. The camera runs on film, so if you're bad at taking photos, you'll need to collect film strips. Remember that tab we left at banana medals earlier? Well, if you collect 15 of them, you can get access to the game Jetpack. If you get a score of 5,000, you'll receive a rareware coin. In addition to the rareware coin, there's also the Nintendo coin, which is unlocked when you play through the first 4 levels of the original Donkey Kong arcade cabinet twice. These 2 coins are used to open one specific door. There are also 5 pearls, which can be traded with a mermaid for a golden banana, and a bean, which can be planted to receive another golden banana. Okay, I can breathe again. Obviously, I like to collect stuff in my collectathons, but I think everyone agrees that there's a problem with DK64's collectibles. I wouldn't say there's too many of them. My issue is more that there's a lot that feels shoehorned in. The rareware and Nintendo coins would make for cool Easter eggs, but it seems weird to require them to complete the game. The Donkey Kong arcade segment that unlocks the Nintendo coin ruins the flow of gameplay and can be frustratingly challenging. Battle crowns and banana medals also feel unnecessary in the larger scope of things. The homing ammo might deserve the award for the most useless item, considering how uncommon it is to find and the fact that you can't swap between it and regular ammo. If you collect homing ammo and then need to shoot a target switch, you'll end up wasting it because the homing mechanic only corrects course to hit an enemy. If you successfully take a picture of a banana fairy, she completely replenishes all of your usable items and increases the max holding amount by 1. In order for the film strips to be useful, you would have to miss a dozen or so pictures, because otherwise it would be replenished naturally. The economy in this game is beyond broken. In total, there are around 977 banana coins. I say around because I've seen different sources give different answers on the total. Famously, a coin which was previously unknown to the community was discovered as recently as 2017, so I cannot say for certain how many coins exist. But what I can say for certain is the amount of opportunities to use said coins. Of the 900 plus coins that can be collected, only 160 can ever be used in a single playthrough. This means over 75% of the coins in the game are worthless. The coins aren't even registered on the save file completion percentage, meaning collecting anything beyond 160 coins is an utter waste of time. Useless items are never a good thing to have in your game, precisely because they are pointless. One really easy way to fix DK64's economy is to remove or nerf rainbow coins. 400 of the 900 something coins in this game come from this source. In fact, as soon as I have access to rainbow coins, I will completely ignore regular coins in most playthroughs. Once we remove the rainbow coins, my next remedy is something I've already talked about. If Wrinkly charged for a device like she used to, it would be a great opportunity to allow the player to spend their hard-earned currency. With these two small changes, the economy would look a lot healthier. This first section of Jungle Japes requires us to swing on vines to hit a switch to open a door. This seems like a pretty good first challenge, but there's a major issue here. Did you catch that? The Donkey Kong Simian Slam switch responded to a basic jump. From a game design perspective, this is a heinous act. Before the player had access to the exterior of the DK Isles, a lone ground pound switch prevented their freedom. That switch only responded to a Simian Slam. No amount of basic jumps would cause it to budge. So in the first 15 minutes of gameplay, the player is receiving conflicting pieces of information. Either Simian Slam pads only respond to the Simian Slam move, or they respond to a basic jump. There's an idea in game design that objects that look and sound the same should also behave the same, except in particular rare cases. The best rare case example I can think of is in the third generation of Pokemon. In the Team Aqua base in Emerald, Ruby, and Sapphire, there are 4 Pokeballs nested in the corner of a room. These Pokeballs look identical to all the other overworld item sprites shown throughout the game. But 2 of these 4 items are not items at all, but instead Pokemon encounters. Electrode are Pokemon that are shaped and colored like Pokeballs, and within the lore of the game, were created in an experiment involving them. So when the player goes to collect an item, and encounters an Electrode instead, they immediately understand why. This trope of enemies disguised as items originated in Dungeons & Dragons, and these kinds of enemies are appropriately named mimics. This pad at the beginning of Jungle Japes is the only pad like this in the whole game, so there isn't anything clever going on here. When the gate opens, it reveals a short tunnel housing a few banana coins. At the end of the tunnel, we initiate a cutscene showing Diddy's whereabouts. The game wants us to free Diddy from his cell straight away, but I'd like to explore the level first. Walking around reveals a large boulder, minecart, and steep hill, all of which cannot be taken advantage of at this time. 3 large gates block off additional tunnels, meaning that we're relegated to this portion of the level. In order to progress, we have to engage with Diddy Kong. The linearity of this level is by no mistake. DK64's levels are expansive and can get busy, so slowly having the first level open up isn't a bad idea. On our ascent to freeing Diddy, we encounter a mysterious pad on the ground. These pads teleport you to a fighting arena where you have to survive a certain length of time to get your reward. One really cool detail is the fact that the crowd is actively rooting against you. These battle arenas are K-Rule sanctioned fights, so it makes sense that the audience is awaiting your downfall. Every enemy killed achieves a unanimous booing, and every successful blow from your opponent results in cheering and applause. When the match is over, Funky's Armory awaits us. With our 3 banana coins from the cave, we can finally sink our teeth into our very first gun. The lack of background check, however, makes this the 3rd most irresponsible gun sale of 1999. When we finally reach Diddy's cage, we meet eye to eye with a golden banana. Diddy then tells us about the coconut target switches, and we finally get to use our new hardware. The switches are located above the various blocked off caves, and upon shooting them all, Diddy gets released. We then hike back up to get our second golden banana, which opens the gates. The target switches don't open the barriers they're positioned above. Instead, they open Diddy's cage, which is in a remote location. That cage reveals a banana which magically opens the barriers below the switches you just shot. What is supposed to be a simple task becomes artificially confusing. As to why the sequence of events happens in this order is beyond me. While we're at the top of the mountain, now might be a good time to talk about Snide. Snide is an ex-member of K-Rool's army, like K-Lumsy, who defected to the Kong side of the conflict. He was the lead technician on the Blastomatic, shown in the opening cutscene, but was kicked off the crew for being untrustworthy. With access to the laser's blueprints, Snide believes he could be of assistance to the Kong Rebellion. As a further incentive, Snide offers 1 golden banana per blueprint piece. I was always confused as a kid why Snide was the only non-reptilian member of K. Rool's army, but now it makes perfect sense. A lot of the characters in this game have puns or jokes baked into their names. Remember the talking signpost obscuring the entrance to this level? His name is B. Locker. You know, like blocker, like one who blocks. K. Lumsy will later be shown to be clumsy, and of course, K. Rool is someone who is cruel. Snide appears to be some sort of mustelid or rodent, which in itself doesn't mean anything, but considering that words like rat and weasel can be used to describe a disloyal person, and considering Snide was kicked off the team for being untrustworthy, he is literally and figuratively a rat. The word Snide even means devious. Now is probably a good time to venture through the previously blocked off areas. One tunnel has 2 Casplats. These are the guys that carry the blueprint pieces. The yellow hairdo on this one means that we have the correct Kong for the job. Unlike most of the enemies in this game, Casplats can't be killed in one hit. But don't be fooled, because they're still pushovers. The other 2 tunnels connect to each other and branch off into different areas. One such area houses Cranky's lab, where we can get the barrel blast move. Behind that, we can find a peculiar looking crate, and when we touch it, we transform into Rambi the Rhino. For the uncultured, Rambi is sort of like the Donkey Kong universe's version of Yoshi, a trusty steed who can tank an additional hit. In DKC 1 and 2, Rambi showed up in a plethora of levels, and in some cases, he was required for certain challenges. Besides Rambi, there were a handful of other helpful allies like Squidder the Spider, Rattly the Snake, and On Guard the Swordfish, to name a few. Together, these allies are called Animal Buddies, and they were a staple of the Donkey Kong Country trilogy. Surely an integral part of the series would be handled with care on the voyage to the 3rd dimension, right? Nope. The Animal Buddies in DK64 are thoroughly castrated. Firstly, only 2 levels in the game give you access to Animal Buddies: Jungle Japes and Gloomy Galleon. This is already a disappointment, as it means that it's a feature you won't encounter very often throughout the game. Secondly, there are only 2 animal buddies that appear in the game, 1 on each of the levels. This is yet another letdown. With such a wide range of creatures to pick from the series, it sucks that we're only left with Rambi and On Guard. A level making use of Espresso's gliding ability or Ellie's water inhalation could have been really neat. It just feels like a lost opportunity. Thirdly, you are prohibited from exploring the levels freely as an animal buddy. This design choice is downright infuriating. The thought process of a new player might be to take Rambi back to the large boulder earlier in the level and try to bust it open with Rambi's horn. But they'll be sorely disappointed when the game transforms you back into your regular form, seemingly out of the blue. If you walk straight through the tunnel or turn right, you immediately lose access to playing as Rambi, and the tunnel to the left just brings you to 2 dead ends. There is a tiny gerrymandered section of the map where you can play as Rambi, and it is seemingly done for no reason. One theory I had was that by preventing you from accessing the rest of the map, the development team could avoid having to create a swimming animation for Rambi, saving some time and resources. But bizarrely, if you somehow get out of bounds or use cheats, Rambi has a fully functional doggy paddle animation that is impossible to access by normal means. This implies that you were able to leave the tiny Native American reservation that the final game enforces. While playing as On Guard, you have significantly more freedom to move around the level. You are still restricted by an invisible barrier, as well as your inability to move on land, but there is certainly more room to move around. By far the largest nail in the coffin of animal buddies in DK64 is that there just isn't enough to do with them. Rambi has 4 huts and a wall to destroy, and On Guard has a wall and several treasure chests to destroy, in addition to flailing around a floating insignia. All of the animal buddy content can be exhausted in a couple minutes, and that isn't an exaggeration. Earlier, I compared Rambi to Yoshi, but the way the animal buddies translated into the 3rd dimension is more analogous to the Mumbo transformations of Banjo-Kazooie, which are handled so much better. In Banjo-Kazooie, you have to collect special tokens to exchange with a shaman to turn into various animals and objects. These transformations can be used to reach new areas and interact with the environment in ways Banjo and Kazooie can't. For example, the steep slopes in the termite hill of Mumbo's Mountain can only be trekked while playing as a termite. All of the gripes I have with DK64's animal buddies are not present in Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie's transformations appear in 5 out of 9 levels, whereas Donkey Kong 64's animal buddies appear in 2 out of 7 levels. Banjo-Kazooie offers 5 unique transformations, whereas DK64 only offers 2. With a single exception, Banjo-Kazooie's transformations permit you to go to any portion of the level you can reach. And if you leave a level, you'll receive a message saying that the magic will run out if you continue. This blows DK64's limited areas and abrupt reversions out of the water. Banjo-Kazooie also makes better use of the transformations it provides. The pumpkin form, for example, is used for several jiggies, unlocking a new level, and to obtain a cheat code. It takes a while to accomplish everything that Pumpkin Banjo is capable of. Once we've exhausted our duties as Rambi, we can find a pad for Donkey Kong underneath one of the huts we smashed. Activating it reveals a golden banana. With our new potion from Cranky, we can also launch ourselves into the sky and play a barrel cannon minigame. This is an obvious callback to the original Donkey Kong Country trilogy, namely DKC1. Prevalent throughout many levels in DKC are barrel blasting segments that require you to launch yourself through the air in rapid succession. These moments broke up traditional 2D platforming in a fun and engaging manner. When adapting them into a three-dimensional environment, the decision was made to make them first person, which I think was a splendid idea. I've always been a fan of toying with the element of perspective, and as a diehard Donkey Kong fan, I think it's fascinating seeing barrel blasting from a different lens. Without the larger Donkey Kong Country context, I could see how this minigame is uneventful, but with a vast knowledge of the series, I appreciate what is being done here. Now with our 4 golden bananas and blueprint, the majority of the time playing this level from here on out will be as different Kongs. To switch to another Kong, you'll have to find one of many tag barrels, which brings you to a selection menu. What seems like a benign feature is actually the epicenter of the ire targeted towards this game. In an interview with Polygon, a developer from A Hat in Time claimed that the tedious nature of collecting items in Donkey Kong 64 is partially responsible for the death of the 3D platformer genre. Now, what exactly did Karelev mean when he said that collecting items in DK64 is tedious? You see, certain items can only be collected by certain Kongs. Usually this is telegraphed to the player through color coding. Yellow objects, like common bananas, blueprints, and coins, can only be collected by Donkey Kong. Red corresponds to Diddy, blue to Lanky, purple to Tiny, and green to Chunky. If you're walking down a path with yellow and red bananas, you will be unable to collect them both with one Kong. And because you can't swap Kongs on the fly, you'll have to backtrack to the nearest tag barrel. This scenario is baked into the gameplay loop, meaning you'll experience it a lot. In Super Mario 64, some levels have coins floating in the sky. This means that through normal means, they're only accessible with the wing cap. Wing caps can only be found in select locations stored in designated wing cap boxes. At first, this scenario might seem analogous to DK64's character-coded items. Just trade wing cap with Kong and wing cap box with tag barrel. But the major difference is accessibility. In DK64, I can access Diddy Kong's bananas as DK, I just can't collect them for some reason. In SM64, the coins in the sky cannot be accessed without the wing cap, but hypothetically, you could collect them without it. To put this in a flawed analogy, DK64's collectibles are like if your mom placed an ice cream sundae in front of you and said you can only eat it if you mow the lawn. SM64's collectibles are like if your mom told you to mow the lawn, and as a reward, you could have and eat an ice cream sundae. In DK64, you get taunted and frustrated by the reward sitting in front of you that you cannot collect. Upon further contemplation, I have a theory as to why certain items can only be collected by certain Kongs. By requiring the player to repeatedly swap characters, you are effectively padding out the game. One of the more notable aspects of DK64 is how long it takes to complete. According to HowLongToBeat.com, DK64 takes an average 27 hours to complete the main story. For comparison, Banjo-Kazooie's main story takes 11.5, and Super Mario 64's takes 12. HowLongToBeat.com ranks DK64 as the 7th longest game of the entire Nintendo 64 library. Clearly the developers wanted to make a lengthy game, even if it meant artificially including some padding. But the question is, why? Through my research, I cannot find a reliable source for DK64's price on launch, but I can say for near certain that the game costs significantly more money than most of its contemporaries. This comes down to the fact that DK64 cannot run on a vanilla N64. meaning you needed the 4 MB expansion pack to play the game. I suspect that the increased price tag necessitated a longer playtime in order to make it seem worthwhile to consumers. The only other game to completely require the expansion pack was Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which is ranked as the 8th longest game of the N64's library. There's a very popular rumor that has lingered on the internet regarding this game's reliance on the expansion pack. As the rumor goes, the Rareware developers working on DK64 encountered a crash-related bug that was so difficult to patch that the only way to circumvent it was to use additional memory. This rumor was addressed by Mark Stevenson, the lead artist for DK64, in a Nintendo Life interview from 2019. On the topic of the bug myth, Stevenson said, "This one's a myth. The decision to use the expansion pack happened a long time before the game shipped. In fact, we were called in by management and told that we were going to use the expansion pack and that we needed to find ways to do stuff in the game that justified its use and made it a selling point. I suspect that DK64's bloated nature comes from corporate meddling." Stevenson mentioned how management required the team to incorporate the expansion pack's features into the game. I think a domino effect occurred where the requirement to use the expansion pack meant that the consumer would be paying more for DK64 than a normal N64 game. This caused the team to increase the playtime to make the price tag seem more appetizing. And with limited resources and time, the best way to make the game take longer was to artificially pad it out. Now I know this will get mentioned in the comments if I don't bring it up, but there is a mod designed to address the tedium of swapping Kongs. The Switch Kongs Anywhere ROM hack allows the player to freely swap between any Kong at their leisure, except for in areas that crash the game. Personally, I haven't played it, but I would be interested to try it out sometime. I'd like to talk a little bit more about how the game handles multiple protagonists. The 5 playable characters are working together on a common overarching goal, but teamwork is underutilized in the challenges. Levels often feel like 5 separate journeys instead of 1. Why go through the trouble of creating multiple playable characters if the gameplay wasn't built around their synergy? The game design makes the multiple protagonist idea seem like an afterthought, but the advertising makes it seem like a forethought. In Jungle Japes, for example, Donkey Kong can get all his bananas without swapping once. Diddy only needs another Kong's help for just one of his bananas. Later levels are similar to this. If you want an example of a game that did multiple protagonists right, I would say that GTA 5 is your best bet. Many of the main story missions encourage and require you to swap characters. Unlike DK64, swapping can be done from anywhere and doesn't require backtracking. Franklin, Michael, and Trevor feel like a genuine team, whereas the DK crew feels fragmented. One of the most entertaining aspects to GTA 5's multiple protagonists is seeing how the characters interact with each other. Michael interacts with Jimmy in a deadbeat father-son relationship. Trevor and Jimmy have a sort of uncle-nephew relationship, and Franklin and Jimmy act like distant friends. In DK64, Snide, Candy, and Funky don't have any unique dialogue with the Kongs. Candy Kong talks to her boyfriend the same way she talks to a spastic orangutan. I know this isn't a story-heavy game, but I feel like the least they could have done is create some Kong-specific greetings for shop owners. I'm ending the video here, but if you've made it this far, I'd appreciate if you'd support the channel.